Hello, this is Harrison Walton, and you are listening to How to Overcome Negative Thoughts, Mental Clarity Audiobook, provided to you by United Audiobooks. I hope you enjoy my audiobook. Now, let us begin.
Introduction. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. John Milton, Paradise Lost. Have you ever noticed how a single negative thought can spiral into a full-blown internal catastrophe within minutes? One moment, you're contemplating a small mistake, and the next, you're mentally rehearsing every failure you've ever experienced. This mental quicksand, where one negative thought pulls you deeper into others, isn't just uncomfortable, it fundamentally alters how you experience your life. I didn't create this audiobook because I've mastered perfect thinking. Far from it. I wrote it because I've spent years watching brilliant, capable people, myself included, get hijacked by thought patterns that simply don't serve them. The scientist in me wanted to understand why our minds so readily default to negativity, while the human in me desperately wanted solutions that actually work in real life, not just in laboratory settings. Emma, a marketing executive I interviewed during my research, described her experience with negative thinking as having an extremely critical roommate living in my head who never sleeps. She could deliver flawless presentations to clients, manage complex projects with ease, yet would spend hours afterward fixating on minor imperfections only she had noticed. Her professional confidence was at odds with her private thought world, a disconnect I've seen repeatedly across professions, age groups, and personalities. Then there was Marcus, a medical student who nearly abandoned his lifelong dream because catastrophic thinking about potential failure consumed so much mental energy that studying became almost impossible. I wasn't failing because I couldn't do the work, he told me. I was failing because I couldn't stop imagining myself failing. These stories aren't exceptional. They're the norm. Our brains, with their ancient survival wiring, are masterful at detecting threats and predicting problems. This feature, not a bug, helped our ancestors survive, but it's poorly calibrated for modern life, where physical dangers are relatively rare, while psychological stressors are constant. The transformation I've witnessed when people apply the science-backed strategies in this audiobook is nothing short of remarkable. They don't just think more positively, a superficial approach that rarely works. They fundamentally rewire their neural pathways to create more balanced, realistic, and ultimately more helpful thought patterns. This audiobook distills what neuroscience and psychology have discovered about this process into practical steps anyone can implement, regardless of how entrenched your negative thinking might seem. I'm profoundly grateful to the researchers whose work forms the scientific backbone of this audiobook, particularly Drs. Aaron Beck, David Burns, and Kristen Neff, whose pioneering approaches to cognitive distortions and self-compassion have changed countless lives. Equal thanks go to the hundreds of individuals who candidly shared their struggles and successes with me, proving that transformation is always possible. If you're listening to this, you've likely experienced the exhaustion of battling your own mind. Perhaps you're tired of overthinking, second-guessing, or mentally rehearsing worst-case scenarios. You might wonder if freedom from these patterns is even possible for someone like you. I created this audiobook because the answer is unequivocally yes, not based on wishful thinking, but on solid science and real-world results. The chapters that follow aren't about positive thinking platitudes or denying legitimate concerns. They're about understanding how your mind works and learning to work with it rather than against it. You won't find quick fixes here, but you will discover sustainable strategies that grow more effective with practice. Thank you for bringing this audiobook into your life. It represents the beginning of a partnership between us. I've gathered the tools, but you'll be the one wielding them. Some days this work will feel effortless. Other days it will require more intention. What matters is that you've already taken the first step simply by acknowledging there might be a different way to relate to your thoughts. Let's start this journey together, not with the expectation of perfection, but with curiosity about what becomes possible when we learn to navigate our inner landscape with greater skill and compassion. Rewire the story your mind keeps repeating. Have you ever noticed how your thoughts can turn against you, replaying worst-case scenarios or magnifying small worries into overwhelming fears? I know that mental spiral well. The restless loop where logic fades and self-doubt grows louder than reason. But what I've learned, both through science and experience, is that negative thoughts are not facts. They're mental habits, and like any habit, they can be changed. Real transformation begins when you stop believing every thought your mind presents and start understanding where those thoughts come from. Once you can see the deeper patterns behind your thinking, you gain the power to respond rather than react. This is how calm becomes possible, not as an abstract idea, but as a trained state of mind grounded in awareness and compassion. To help you go beyond this audiobook and deepen your self-awareness, I collaborated with Books for Growth to create the free What is Your Psychological Archetype quiz. It blends evidence-based psychology with intuitive insight, revealing how your emotional patterns and cognitive habits intertwine. By understanding your unique mental blueprint, you'll learn how to quiet the noise of overthinking, restore balance, and strengthen the neural pathways that support resilience and peace. You don't have to stay trapped in the loops your mind created long ago. Visit quiz.booksforgrowth.com to get started. That's quiz.books4growth.com. Again, quiz.booksforgrowth.com. Chapter 1: Beyond Positive Thinking, the Art of Cognitive Reframing. Why traditional positive thinking falls short. Negative thoughts don't simply vanish when countered with positive affirmations. If you've ever tried to force yourself to think happy thoughts during a difficult time, you've likely discovered this truth firsthand. The mind doesn't respond to simplistic overrides. It requires a more sophisticated approach. Cognitive reframing, unlike conventional positive thinking, doesn't ask you to deny reality or paint false smiles over genuine concerns. Instead, it invites you to see your thought patterns with clarity and transform them through understanding rather than suppression. When we face persistent negative thinking patterns, we're dealing with neural pathways that have been reinforced over time, not character flaws or personal failings. Your brain has developed habits of processing information in certain ways, often protective mechanisms that once served a purpose, but may now limit your potential and happiness. This first chapter establishes the foundation for why cognitive reframing represents a more nuanced, effective approach than merely trying to think positive. Cognitive reframing stands apart from positive thinking in one crucial way. It acknowledges the validity of your experience while challenging the interpretations that intensify suffering. Where positive thinking might say, just look on the bright side, reframing asks what other perspectives might also be true. This distinction is vital because acknowledging reality builds trust with yourself rather than creating internal conflict. Throughout this audiobook, we'll explore how working with your mind rather than against it creates sustainable change. The science supporting cognitive reframing is substantial and reassuring. Research in neuroscience and psychology consistently demonstrates that how we interpret events shapes our emotional responses more powerfully than the events themselves. When you learn to identify and restructure automatic negative thoughts, you're not engaging in wishful thinking. You're working with your brain's natural plasticity to create new neural pathways. These pathways eventually become your default mode, allowing emotional resilience to develop naturally rather than through constant effort. In the sections ahead, we'll first explore how to recognize your unique thought patterns with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Self-awareness is the cornerstone of cognitive reframing, allowing you to see the specific ways your mind processes information and generates emotional responses. You'll learn practical techniques for observing your thoughts without becoming entangled in them, a skill that requires the space needed for meaningful change. We'll then move beyond awareness into structured techniques for analyzing and reshaping your thought patterns. Rather than teaching you to simply replace negative thoughts with positive ones, these evidence-based approaches will help you examine the validity of your interpretations and expand your perspective. This process builds cognitive flexibility, the ability to consider multiple viewpoints rather than becoming trapped in rigid thinking patterns that feed anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. Finally, we'll explore how to integrate these new thinking skills into your daily life, creating sustainable change rather than temporary relief. The goal isn't to eliminate negative thoughts entirely. That would be both impossible and unwise. Instead, you'll develop a more balanced relationship with your thinking process, recognizing when your interpretations are unnecessarily harsh or narrow, and adjusting them with skill and self-compassion. This balanced approach allows you to navigate life's challenges with greater emotional resilience and reduced suffering. As we begin this journey together, remember that overcoming negative thought patterns isn't about perfection or constant positivity. It's about developing a more accurate, flexible relationship with your own mind, one that allows you to experience the full range of human emotions while not becoming imprisoned by destructive thinking cycles. The techniques you'll learn in this chapter and throughout this audiobook represent powerful tools for creating meaningful change backed by decades of research and countless success stories. Let's start by understanding what cognitive reframing truly is and why it matters so much for your emotional well-being. The quiet art of rewiring thought. John stared out at the Chicago skyline from his apartment window. The setting sun painted the glass buildings in shades of amber and gold, but he saw none of it. His mind churned over the argument with his boss that afternoon, the words that cut, the dismissal of his ideas, the embarrassment that followed. Rain tapped against the window in a steady rhythm. He breathed in the scent of wet concrete, drifting up from the streets below. "You're making too much of this," Sarah had told him over the phone 10 minutes ago. Marcus talks to everyone that way. But the memory of it twisted in his gut. The conference room of watching eyes, the slight curl of Marcus's lip, as he had said, "This isn't what we need right now, John." The phone rang again. John let it go to voicemail. The plant on his windowsill needed water. He touched its dry soil, then turned away. He sat on the edge of his couch and picked up Dr. Benson's book from the side table. "The thought isn't the problem," she had written. "It's the meaning you assign it." John's therapist had recommended the book after he had described his pattern. Small setbacks spinning into catastrophic futures, criticism transforming into certainty of failure. He flipped through dog-eared pages, stopping at underlined sentences. The television played silently in the background, blue light flickering across the room. On the street below, a car horn blared. John closed the book and walked to the kitchen. He reached for a glass and filled it with water. "Marcus wasn't rejecting me," he said aloud, testing the words. He was rejecting that particular proposal. The distinction felt paper-thin, but he tried it again. "The meeting didn't go well. That doesn't mean I'm incompetent." The words sounded hollow, yet something inside them tugged at him. He returned to the window. The city lights now punctured the darkening sky. He wondered what might happen if he separated the facts from his interpretations of them. If he could train himself to see the difference between what happened and the story he told about what happened. A siren wailed in the distance. He watched its red lights flash between buildings, growing brighter, then fading away. What would it mean to truly understand that perception shapes reality, not just as a concept to be intellectually grasped, but as a daily practice that might transform how he experienced his life. The evolution beyond positivity. Cognitive reframing represents a profound shift from the conventional think happy thoughts approach that dominated self-help literature for decades. While positive thinking encourages replacing negative thoughts with cheerful alternatives, cognitive reframing delves deeper into how we interpret our experiences. It's a structured approach that acknowledges our thoughts as interpretations rather than absolute truths, allowing us to examine and reconstruct those interpretations in more balanced ways. This psychological tool doesn't ask us to ignore reality, but rather to view it through multiple lenses. Imagine your mind as a camera with different lenses. The standard lens you've been using might capture life in harsh, unflattering light, emphasizing flaws and potential dangers. Cognitive reframing doesn't ask you to put on rose-colored filters that distort reality. Instead, it teaches you to adjust your focus, aperture, and perspective to capture a more complete picture. Sometimes zooming out reveals context that changes everything. Other times, a macro lens shows details previously missed. The distinction between positive thinking and cognitive reframing becomes clearer when we examine their underlying mechanisms. Positive thinking often operates on the principle of thought substitution, replacing "I failed" with "I'll succeed next time." While this can temporarily boost mood, it doesn't address how we arrived at the initial negative interpretation. Cognitive reframing, rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy, examines the evidence, biases, and assumptions that led to the original thought. It challenges distortions like all or nothing thinking, catastrophizing, and mind reading that frequently contaminate our interpretations. This difference isn't merely academic. Studies show that while positive thinking can provide temporary emotional relief, cognitive reframing creates lasting resilience by rewiring neural pathways. When we consistently practice examining and restructuring our thought patterns, we create new mental habits that become increasingly automatic over time. This neuroplasticity explains why cognitive reframing produces more durable results than simple positive affirmations. The work requires more effort initially, but creates deeper systematic change. Cognitive reframing also distinguishes itself through its relationship with difficult emotions. Traditional positive thinking sometimes inadvertently encourages emotional avoidance, pushing down feelings of sadness, anger, or fear in favor of artificially imposed happiness. This suppression can backfire, intensifying the negative emotions we're trying to escape. In contrast, cognitive reframing acknowledges all emotions as information. It doesn't ask us to ignore feelings, but to examine the thoughts generating them. This validation of our emotional experience, coupled with careful examination of its cognitive foundations, creates a more integrated approach to psychological well-being. Cognitive reframing doesn't replace negative thoughts with positive ones. It transforms rigid, distorted thinking into flexible, evidence-based perspectives that honor reality while supporting resilience. Mapping your mental landscape. Understanding your thought patterns begins with awareness. Most people navigate through life on autopilot, rarely stopping to examine the thoughts that drive their emotions and behaviors. These automatic thoughts, quick, evaluative, mental responses to situations, shape our reality more powerfully than we realize. They're like a running commentary beneath our conscious awareness, interpreting events according to deeply held beliefs about ourselves, others, and the world. By deliberately slowing down and paying attention to this internal dialogue, you can start mapping the terrain of your mind. The process is similar to becoming an anthropologist of your own thinking. You observe without immediately judging, taking notes on recurring themes. What situations trigger negative thoughts? What specific phrases or images appear in your mind during distress? Are there particular times of day when negative thinking intensifies? This curious, detached observation creates a small but crucial space between you and your thoughts. The first step toward realizing that you are not your thoughts, but the awareness watching them unfold. Research in cognitive psychology reveals that certain thought distortions appear universally across cultures. These include catastrophizing, assuming the worst possible outcome, black and white thinking, seeing situations in absolute terms, personalizing, blaming yourself for events beyond your control, and emotional reasoning, treating feelings as evidence for reality. By familiarizing yourself with these common distortions, you gain a vocabulary to identify them in your own thinking. This recognition alone can diminish their power. The emotional impact of thoughts requires careful attention during this mapping process. Our emotions serve as messengers, alerting us to thought patterns that might otherwise remain invisible. When you experience a strong emotional reaction, anxiety, anger, sadness, or shame, treat it as a signpost pointing toward underlying thoughts. Ask yourself, what am I telling myself about this situation that's creating this feeling? The emotion itself isn't the problem. It's valuable data about your interpretations. Think of your mind as a vast network of neural pathways, like trails through a forest. The paths you travel most frequently become wider and easier to follow, while rarely used routes grow faint and overgrown. Your habitual thoughts represent these well-worn paths, default interpretations that your mind automatically follows. Some of these pathways lead to scenic outlooks and peaceful clearings. Others end at cliff edges or circle back on themselves in frustrating loops. Mapping your mental landscape means identifying both the productive routes and the problematic ones. This exploration reveals something profound. The same external event can trigger radically different thought sequences in different people, or even in the same person at difficult times. When you receive constructive criticism, for instance, one thought pathway might lead to, "This feedback means I'm incompetent and will never improve." Another might travel, "This feedback highlights specific areas where I can grow." These divergent interpretations create entirely different emotional and behavioral outcomes, though the triggering event remains identical. Documenting your thought patterns accelerates this discovery process. Whether through journaling, voice recordings, or structured thought records, externalization brings clarity. Research shows that writing thoughts down reduces their emotional intensity and helps us examine them more objectively. The act of documentation also reveals connections between seemingly separate incidents, the recurring themes and beliefs that thread through diverse situations like an invisible connecting fiber. How might your life transform if you could see your thoughts not as absolute truths, but as testable hypotheses about reality? The architecture of perception transformation. Altering how we perceive and interpret our thoughts requires more than wishful thinking. It demands a systematic approach that challenges deep-seated mental habits and builds new pathways for processing information. The techniques below draw from decades of research in cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness practices, and positive psychology, offering practical tools rather than vague encouragements. Each approach targets a specific aspect of the thought transformation process, from initial awareness to lasting integration. Cognitive distancing stands as a fundamental technique for changing thought interpretations. This practice involves creating psychological space between yourself and your thoughts, viewing them as mental events rather than direct reflections of reality. When you catch yourself thinking, "I'm a failure," try rephrasing it as, "I notice I'm having the thought that I'm a failure." This slight shift changes your relationship to the thought, allowing you to observe it rather than becoming absorbed in it. Research shows this simple reframing reduces emotional reactivity and creates room for more flexible resources. Your thoughts exist within larger belief systems that act like invisible lenses, coloring everything you see. These core beliefs about your worth, capabilities, and how the world works formed early in life and now operate largely outside conscious awareness. Transforming perceptions requires bringing these beliefs into the light. When a thought triggers strong emotions, ask yourself, what would I have to believe for this interpretation to make sense? This question often reveals limiting beliefs like, I must be perfect to be accepted, or showing vulnerability is dangerous. Once identified, these beliefs become available for reconsideration and revision. The language we use internally shapes our emotional experience with surprising power. Words like always, never, disaster, and unbearable magnify distress, while phrases like at this moment, sometimes, challenging, and uncomfortable create proportional responses. When restructuring thoughts, pay careful attention to your internal vocabulary. Replacing absolutist language with nuanced alternatives doesn't deny difficulties, but frames them in ways that support resilience rather than collapse. This linguistic shift creates emotional breathing room without sacrificing honesty. Think of your attention as a spotlight, illuminating whatever it touches. Many perception problems stem not from what exists, but from where we direct the spotlight. A technique called attention shifting helps redirect this focus. When caught in rumination about a problem, deliberately expand your awareness to include aspects you've been ignoring, potential solutions, available resources, previous successes with similar challenges, or even completely unrelated positive elements in your life. This isn't about denying problems, but about creating a more complete picture that includes counterbalancing information. The Clear Cognitive Reframing Framework. The Clear framework offers a structured approach to transforming thought patterns and emotional responses. Each component represents a crucial step in the reframing process, guiding you from initial awareness to lasting change. By moving through these stages systematically, you develop the skills to reshape perceptions in ways that foster resilience and psychological flexibility. Capture. The first component, capture, involves becoming aware of and documenting automatic thoughts as they occur. This step requires developing the habit of mental self-observation, noticing when emotions shift, and immediately identifying the thoughts that preceded the change. Capture can be accomplished through journaling, voice memos, thought records, or simple mental noting. The key is to catch thoughts quickly before they trigger cascading emotional reactions. For effective capture, timing matters significantly. Research shows that thoughts recorded immediately have different qualities than those recalled hours later. When possible, document thoughts as they happen, noting the situation that triggered them, the specific thoughts that arose, and the emotions and physical sensations that followed. This immediate recording prevents memory distortion and provides accurate data for the later stages of reframing. The capture phase also includes identifying recurring patterns. As you collect thought samples over days or weeks, look for themes, repeated phrases, or simple interpretations across different situations. These patterns often reveal core beliefs, operating beneath the surface of daily thinking. For instance, if you notice thoughts like, they're only being nice because they want something, appearing in various social contexts, this might point to an underlying trust issue worthy of exploration. Link. The link component focuses on connecting thoughts to their emotional and behavioral consequences. This step involves analyzing how specific interpretations create predictable emotional reactions, which in turn influence behaviors. Understanding these connections reveals the power of thoughts in shaping your lived experience and highlights opportunities for intervention. For example, the thought, my friend didn't respond to my message because they're angry with me, links to feelings of anxiety or shame, which might lead to behaviors like excessive apologizing or avoiding future contact. Alternatively, the thought, my friend is probably busy and will respond when they can, connects to feelings of patience and understanding, resulting in very different behavioral choices. By mapping these links explicitly, you gain insight into how thoughts drive your emotional life. The linking process also helps identify thoughts with the greatest impact on well-being. Some interpretations may trigger mild irritation, while others launch intense anxiety or deep depression. Prioritizing high-impact thought patterns for reframing creates efficient progress. The most powerful shifts often come from addressing thoughts connected to core emotional needs like belonging, competence, and autonomy. Examination involves testing the validity and helpfulness of identified thoughts. This critical component distinguishes cognitive reframing from positive thinking by subjecting thoughts to evidence-based scrutiny rather than simply replacing them with pleasant alternatives. The examination process uses rational inquiry to evaluate interpretations against reality. Key questions drive this examination. What evidence supports this thought? What evidence contradicts it? Am I confusing feelings with facts? What cognitive distortions might be operating here? How would I view the situation if it happened to someone else? What alternative explanations might exist? These questions help distinguish between accurate perceptions requiring acceptance and distorted interpretations requiring revision. The examination phase also considers a thought's utility. Even when a negative interpretation contains some truth, it may not be helpful to focus on it exclusively. For instance, dwelling on possible failure scenarios before an important presentation might be factually justifiable. Failure is indeed possible, but practically counterproductive. The goal is finding interpretations that are both realistic and useful, acknowledging challenges while supporting effective action. Altering involves crafting alternative interpretations that better serve your well-being, while remaining grounded in reality. This step transforms rigid, unhelpful thinking into flexible perspectives that accommodate complexity and support resilience. Effective alterations maintain truthfulness while expanding beyond limiting viewpoints. Creating powerful alternative interpretations requires balancing several qualities. The new perspective should acknowledge valid concerns from the original thought, incorporate a broader range of evidence, consider multiple possibilities rather than single certainties, use proportional language that matches the situation's actual impact, and support constructive action. The goal isn't blind optimism, but reasoned hope, interpretations that recognize difficulties while maintaining possibilities for growth. Consider an example. The original thought I made a mistake on this project, which proves I'm incompetent, might be altered to I made a specific error that I can learn from. This mistake doesn't define my overall abilities, and recognizing it gives me a chance to improve. This alternative acknowledges the error without overgeneralizing, creates a learning opportunity from difficulty, and supports problem solving rather than self-condemnation. Reinforce. The final component, reinforce, involves strengthening new thought patterns through consistent practice and environmental support. Cognitive science shows that neural pathways strengthen through repetition. The more you activate a particular thought pattern, the more automatic it becomes. This component creates systems that reinforce healthier interpretations until they become your default response. Reinforcement strategies include regular review of alternative interpretations, environmental reminders like notes or phone alerts with key reframing phrases, deliberate practice during low-stress periods, visualization of applying new interpretations to future situations, and celebration of successful reframing moments. These practices help bridge the gap between understanding reframing intellectually and applying it automatically in daily life. The reinforcement phase also includes creating social support for new thought patterns, sharing your reframing goals with trusted others, practicing verbalization of alternative interpretations, and seeking environments that reflect your desired thought patterns all strengthen the change process. The people around us powerfully influence our thinking habits. Surrounding yourself with those who demonstrate healthy cognitive patterns accelerates your own transformation. The clear framework transforms cognitive reframing from an abstract concept into a practical process, guiding you from initial awareness through systematic analysis to lasting change in how you perceive and respond to life's challenges. Transforming thought patterns, the path forward. Throughout this chapter, we've explored how cognitive reframing stands apart from simplistic positive thinking. Rather than merely plastering over negative thoughts with affirmations, you've learned to examine your thought patterns with genuine curiosity and reshape them at their foundation. This approach doesn't deny reality, it expands your perception of it. The systematic analysis of your thought patterns we've discussed isn't just an intellectual exercise. By identifying the themes and triggers behind your thoughts, you've taken the first crucial step toward genuine transformation. Remember that this awareness itself is powerful. You cannot change what you don't acknowledge. The techniques we've explored for altering perceptions are your practical toolkit for daily mental resilience. When you reinterpret situations through multiple perspectives or challenge distorted thinking, you're not just changing thoughts, you're rewiring neural pathways. This is the science-backed foundation that makes cognitive reframing so much more potent than positive thinking alone. What makes this approach particularly valuable is its sustainability. Unlike forced positivity that often collapses under pressure, cognitive reframing builds lasting mental flexibility. You're developing the ability to hold challenging thoughts without being consumed by them, a skill that serves you in every aspect of life. As you practice these techniques, expect initial resistance. Your mind has traveled familiar negative pathways for years. Creating new routes requires consistent effort. But with each reframe, the process becomes more natural. Soon, you'll find yourself automatically considering alternative interpretations before spiraling into old patterns. This is just the beginning of your journey. In the chapters ahead, we'll build on this foundation with targeted strategies for disrupting overthinking spirals, cultivating mental toughness in challenging circumstances, and restoring emotional balance when you feel overwhelmed. You'll discover how to apply cognitive reframing to specific situations like professional setbacks, relationship conflicts, and moments of self-doubt. The skills you're developing aren't just about feeling better, they're about living better. When your thoughts no longer dictate your emotional state, you gain freedom to make choices aligned with your values rather than your fears. You'll approach challenges with curiosity instead of dread and view setbacks as data points rather than definitions of your worth. Consider keeping a reframing journal to document your progress. Note instances where you successfully shifted your perspective and the impact it had on your emotional response. This record becomes powerful evidence of your growing capacity for mental resilience. Remember that mastering cognitive reframing is a practice, not a destination. There will be days when the techniques come easily and days when old thought patterns reassert themselves. Treat yourself with the same compassion you would offer a friend who's learning any complex new skill. You've already taken the most important step by beginning this process. The awareness and techniques you've gained in this chapter are your foundation for overcoming negative thought patterns and building a more resilient mind. Trust the process, practice consistently, and watch as your relationship with your thoughts and ultimately with your life transforms in remarkable ways. Understanding your emotions and changing how you experience your thoughts. As you have seen throughout this chapter, negative thoughts rarely appear alone. They are closely tied to emotion. Every anxious prediction, self-criticism, or mental replay carries a feeling that is asking for attention. When those emotions go unacknowledged, the mind works overtime to explain them, often pulling us deeper into worry, self-doubt, or rumination. I know that struggle personally. For years, I tried to outthink my emotions, believing logic alone could silence the noise in my mind. But real change began when I stopped analyzing my feelings and started understanding them. Once I learned to view emotions not as problems to solve, but as signals to interpret, my thoughts became clearer, calmer, and far less consuming. Recognizing my emotions did not make me weaker. It gave me a steadier kind of strength, the kind that comes from awareness and acceptance. This is why I wanted to offer you something to help you continue this process. Together with Books for Growth, I created a free companion ebook titled Emotional Intelligence in Social Settings. It is a practical and insightful resource that will help you understand how emotions shape your thoughts, influence your interactions, and guide your personal growth. Inside, you will find ways to recognize emotional patterns, respond with greater awareness, and build more balanced, authentic connections, extending the work we have already begun in this book. If you are ready to take the next step toward emotional clarity and inner balance, you can download your free copy by visiting emotions.booksforgrowth.com. That's emotions.books4growth.com. Again, emotions.booksforgrowth.com.
I hope you are enjoying my audiobook so far. It would be a pleasure if you could let me know how you are feeling about this audiobook in the comment section below. We would greatly appreciate it if you could also like this video and subscribe to United Audiobooks to have access to more best-selling audiobooks in the future. Also, if you are interested in getting more free audiobooks, please click the first link in the description below. Now, let us carry on with the next chapter.
Chapter 2. The Plastic Brain. Harnessing Neuroplasticity for Change. Your brain can change, even when you think it can't. Your thoughts aren't permanent fixtures in your mind. The persistent negative thought patterns that may have haunted you for years, the self-doubt, catastrophizing, or harsh self-criticism, aren't hardwired forever. For decades, scientists believed that after childhood, our brains became relatively fixed. We now know this isn't true. Your brain continues to change throughout your entire life, adapting and reorganizing based on your experiences and mental habits. This capacity for change, known as neuroplasticity, offers tremendous hope for anyone struggling with negative thinking patterns. Neuroplasticity is more than just a scientific concept. It's the biological foundation for personal transformation. When you repeatedly engage in certain thoughts or behaviors, your brain strengthens the neural pathways associated with them, making them your default mode of operation. This explains why breaking free from negative thinking can feel so challenging. The good news is that this same mechanism works in reverse. With consistent effort and the right techniques, you can create new, healthier neural pathways that eventually replace problematic thought patterns. What makes neuroplasticity particularly powerful is that it remains active throughout adulthood. While your brain may not be as malleable as it was during childhood, it retains significant capacity for change well into your later years. This means that regardless of how long you've struggled with negative thinking or how deeply entrenched those patterns seem, the possibility for meaningful change remains. Your age, history, or previous attempts at change don't determine your future potential. Your brain's plastic nature ensures that transformation is always within reach. The practical implications of neuroplasticity for overcoming negative thinking are profound. When you understand that your brain physically changes in response to your mental activities, you realize that every thought choice matters. Each time you redirect a negative thought or practice a new response to stress, you're not just having a momentary positive experience. You're physically reshaping your brain's architecture. This biological reality transforms abstract concepts like positive thinking or mindfulness into concrete tools for neural restructuring. Throughout this chapter, we'll explore the fascinating science behind neuroplasticity and what it means for your journey toward more positive thinking. You'll discover why your thought patterns feel so automatic and why changing them initially requires conscious effort. We'll examine how neural connections form and strengthen, providing a roadmap for creating lasting change in how you respond to life's challenges. Most importantly, you'll learn that the power to reshape your thinking isn't theoretical. It's backed by decades of neuroscientific research. We'll also dive into practical methods for harnessing your brain's plasticity. You'll learn specific techniques to interrupt negative thought spirals before they gain momentum. We'll explore evidence-based practices for building resilience and creating new mental habits that support your well-being. Rather than fighting against your brain's natural functioning, you'll discover how to work with your neuroplasticity to create lasting change. The practices introduced here aren't quick fixes. They're reliable tools for gradually reshaping your brain's response patterns. The journey of transforming negative thought patterns isn't always linear. You'll experience setbacks and moments when old patterns resurface. Understanding neuroplasticity helps explain why persistence matters. New neural pathways require consistent reinforcement to become your brain's default response. Each time you practice a new thought pattern, you strengthen those connections, making them more accessible in the future. This chapter equips you with both the knowledge and practical tools to leverage your brain's remarkable capacity for change, empowering you to overcome the negative thinking patterns that have limited your life for too long. The brain that changed itself. Sarah Martin sat at her desk, surrounded by small mountains of psychology textbooks. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the blinds, striping the hardwood floor of her apartment. She had read the same paragraph 5 times. The information about neuroplasticity kept slipping away from her grasp, like water through fingers. Not because it was difficult, but because her mind wandered back to the argument with her mother. "You've always been this way, Sarah," her mother had said on the phone this morning. "Always so sensitive, so quick to anger, just like your father." The words had stung more than they should have. At 34, Sarah thought she had outgrown her mother's power to wound her. She hadn't. She tapped her pencil against the desktop, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeams. The tap, tap, tap matched her heartbeat, still slightly elevated from the memory. The book before her claimed people could change, fundamentally change, their thought patterns and emotional responses. The brain formed new pathways when practiced enough. Sarah marked the passage with her finger. The concept of neuroplasticity introduces a hopeful element to anyone struggling with entrenched negative thinking patterns. She wondered if this applied to her. Could she reshape her quick temper, her tendency to dwell on criticism? The soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen provided a backdrop to her thoughts. Outside, a car horn blared. Sarah glanced up, momentarily distracted. A cardinal landed on her windowsill, tilting its bright red head as though curious about her dilemma. She pushed back from the desk and stretched. Her shoulders cracked. She had been sitting too long. "If the brain can change," she said to the empty room, "then so can I." The thought felt foreign, almost revolutionary. She had spent decades believing she was fixed, immutable, her personality set like concrete since childhood. The bird flew away, a flash of red against the blue sky. Sarah returned to her book, this time underlining a new passage. Through dedicated practice, mental resilience can be developed and enhanced. She rolled the words around in her mind. Practice, development, enhancement. Not fixing something broken, but building something stronger. A memory surfaced. Her father's temper, his shouting matches with her mother, the slammed doors, her inheritance. She had always believed, but what if it wasn't? What if those neural pathways weren't destiny, but simply well-worn trails that could be redirected? Sarah closed the book and walked to the window. The street below bustled with people going about their lives, each with their own well-worn neural pathways. How many of them believed they could change the very structure of their thoughts? How many would try if they knew? If the brain remains plastic throughout life, ready to forge new connections based on repeated thought patterns, what other seemingly fixed aspects of ourselves might we reshape with enough determination and the right knowledge? The science of changing your brain. Neuroplasticity stands as one of neuroscience's most revolutionary discoveries. At its core, this concept reveals that our brains remain changeable throughout our entire lives, not just during childhood as previously believed. Every time you learn something new or repeat an action, your brain physically changes. Neurons, brain cells, form new connections or strengthen existing ones, creating neural pathways that become the biological foundation for habits, skills, and thought patterns. This remarkable adaptability means that no matter how entrenched your negative thinking patterns may seem, your brain possesses the inherent ability to change them. Think of your brain as a vast forest where thoughts travel like hikers on trails. The more frequently a path is traveled, the wider and more established it becomes. Negative thought patterns are like well-worn highways that your mind automatically follows, not because they're the only routes available, but simply because they've been used so often. The beauty of neuroplasticity is that you can consciously forge new paths through this mental landscape. At first, these alternative routes may feel unfamiliar and require more effort to traverse, but with consistent use, they too can become your brain's preferred highways. Scientists have documented this remarkable capacity for neural reorganization in numerous studies. When stroke patients lose function in certain brain areas, surrounding regions often take over those functions through intensive rehabilitation. Musicians' brains show enlarged areas dedicated to processing the sounds and finger movements related to their instruments. London taxi drivers who memorize the city's complex street layout develop larger hippocampi, brain regions crucial for spatial memory. These examples demonstrate how specific mental activities can physically reshape the brain, offering tangible proof that targeted mental practice can create lasting neural changes. The implications for mental health are profound. Depression, anxiety, and chronic negative thinking aren't simply psychological states. They're associated with specific neural activity patterns and brain region connections. Research shows that cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, mindfulness practices, and other mental training techniques can alter these neural patterns. For instance, studies using functional MRI scans reveal that mindfulness meditation practice correlates with reduced activity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, and increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, involved in rational thinking and emotional regulation. These changes don't happen instantly. They require consistent practice, much like building physical muscle requires regular exercise. What makes neuroplasticity particularly powerful for overcoming negative thoughts is how it operates through different mechanisms. Structural plasticity involves physical changes to neural connections, while functional plasticity allows brain regions to shift their roles when needed. Your brain also demonstrates competitive plasticity, where unused connections weaken, while frequently used ones strengthen. This use it or lose it principle explains why breaking negative thought cycles requires not just adding positive thoughts, but also consciously reducing the frequency of negative ones. Every time you challenge a negative thought pattern, you're physically weakening its neural foundation and creating opportunity for new, healthier pathways to form. Building better thought pathways. The concept of neuroplasticity offers hope, but translating this knowledge into practical change requires specific approaches. Mental exercises that target your thought patterns work similarly to physical exercises that strengthen particular muscles. By repeatedly practicing certain types of thinking, you can develop neural pathways that support positive thought patterns while allowing negative ones to gradually weaken. This process doesn't erase your capacity for negative thoughts. That would be neither possible nor desirable. But it does create alternative mental routes that become increasingly easier to access. One powerful method for building these new neural connections involves deliberate attention training. Your brain's neural architecture follows the principle that neurons that fire together wire together, a concept first articulated by psychologist Donald Hebb. When you consistently direct your attention toward positive aspects of situations or constructive solutions rather than problems, you're actually creating stronger neural connections, supporting that thinking style. Start with a simple daily practice. Identify 3 positive events each evening, no matter how small, and reflect on why they happened and what they mean to you. This exercise, studied by positive psychology researchers, strengthens the brain's ability to notice and appreciate positive experiences, a fundamental skill for breaking negative thought cycles. Imagine your attention as a spotlight on a dark stage. Whatever falls within its beam becomes illuminated and processed by your conscious mind, while everything else remains in shadow. Many people with persistent negative thinking have unknowingly trained their attentional spotlight to automatically seek out threats, problems, and flaws. The good news? You can deliberately retrain this spotlight. Practices like mindfulness meditation help you develop greater control over your attention, allowing you to direct it more skillfully. During mindfulness practice, you observe your thoughts without judgment and gently redirect your attention when it wanders. This seemingly simple process physically strengthens neural connections in brain regions responsible for attentional control. The mind is just like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets and the more it can expand. These words from Debunking capture the essence of how deliberate mental practice builds new neural pathways. Physical exercise provides an excellent analogy for understanding this process. When you first begin a new workout routine, the movements feel awkward and require significant effort. Your muscles may protest with soreness the next day. Yet, with consistent practice, these same movements eventually become effortless. Similarly, new thinking patterns initially require conscious effort and may feel unnatural, but neuroplasticity ensures that with repetition, they gradually become your default response. The environment you create for your brain significantly impacts its neuroplastic processes. Research consistently shows that certain factors can either enhance or inhibit your brain's ability to form new neural connections. Physical exercise increases levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, protein that supports neuroplasticity by helping neurons form new connections. Quality sleep allows for memory, consolidation, and neural repair. Chronic stress, conversely, can impair neuroplasticity by flooding the brain with cortisol. This means that a comprehensive approach to changing thought patterns includes attention to these biological factors. Even simple changes, such as a short daily walk, a consistent sleep schedule, or 5-minute relaxation breaks, can create conditions that maximize your brain's natural capacity for positive change. Learning new skills provides another powerful avenue for developing positive neural connections. When you engage in novel activities that challenge your brain, you're not just acquiring specific abilities, you're enhancing your brain's general capacity for change. This principle explains why activities like learning a musical instrument, studying a new language, or mastering a craft can have positive spillover effects on your mental well-being. These pursuits require focused attention, practice through difficulty, and perseverance, the same qualities needed to reshape negative thought patterns. The neural connections formed during skill acquisition strengthen your brain's overall adaptability, making it more responsive to your efforts to change thinking habits in other areas. Social connections also play a crucial role in building resilience. Supporting neural pathways, our brains evolved in highly social environments, and positive social interactions trigger the release of neurotransmitters that support neuroplasticity. Meaningful conversations, particularly those involving deep listening and emotional sharing, activate brain regions associated with empathy and emotional regulation. Even brief positive social interactions can counteract the effects of stress hormones and create what neuroscientists call a buffer effect against negative thinking patterns. Prioritizing healthy relationships provides your brain with regular opportunities to strengthen neural pathways associated with connection, trust, and emotional well-being, all critical components of resilience. What if the persistent negative thoughts you've battled for years are not permanent fixtures of your mind, but simply well-practiced neural pathways waiting to be redirected through consistent, targeted mental exercise? Implementing mental training routines. Transforming knowledge about neuroplasticity into real change requires consistent mental exercises that target specific thought patterns. The key word here is consistent. Just as physical fitness demands regular workouts, mental fitness requires daily practice. Without consistency, new neural pathways won't develop sufficient strength to compete with established negative thinking patterns. The good news is that these exercises don't necessarily require large time commitments. Many can be integrated into your existing routine in just minutes per day. What matters most is the regular repetition that gives your brain clear signals about which neural connections to strengthen. Consider the practice of thought labeling, a simple but powerful technique for reshaping habitual responses to negative thoughts. When a negative thought arises, pause and mentally label it. This is anxiety talking, or I'm having a thought about failure. This tiny intervention creates a crucial moment of separation between you and the thought. Neuroscience research shows that this practice activates the prefrontal cortex while reducing amygdala activity, essentially engaging your brain's rational processing center while calming its emotional alarm system. With repetition, this response becomes increasingly automatic, creating a new neural pathway that allows you to experience negative thoughts without being overwhelmed by them. Exercises work like fitness training for your brain, targeting specific cognitive muscles that need strengthening. Think about how a physical trainer might prescribe different exercises for different body parts. Similarly, different mental exercises target different aspects of thought patterns. Gratitude practices strengthen your brain's ability to notice positive experiences. Self-compassion exercises develop neural pathways for responding to setbacks with kindness rather than criticism. Cognitive reframing builds mental flexibility by strengthening connections between problem recognition and solution-finding brain regions. The key is selecting exercises that specifically address your most challenging thought patterns. Imagine your negative thought patterns as deep grooves in a record, causing the needle to play the same discordant music repeatedly. Each mental exercise you practice helps lift the needle from these familiar grooves and place it on new tracks that play more harmonious melodies. At first, the needle may slip back into the old grooves almost immediately. With practice, however, you'll find yourself able to maintain the new positioning for longer periods, and eventually, the new tracks may become your default playlist. This gradual progress perfectly illustrates how neuroplasticity operates. Not through immediate transformation, but through consistent redirection that eventually creates lasting change. The NDM approach, Neuroplasticity Development Model. Neuroplasticity Development Model, NDM, provides a structured framework for applying neuroplasticity principles to reshape negative thought patterns. This three-stage approach, awareness, action, and reflection, creates a comprehensive system for mental training that addresses both the scientific foundations and practical realities of changing deeply ingrained thinking habits. By working through these stages, you develop the skills needed to consciously direct your brain's natural plastic capabilities toward greater resilience and emotional well-being. Stage 1. Awareness. The awareness stage forms the essential foundation of the neuroplasticity development model. During this phase, you develop the ability to recognize your habitual thought patterns without immediately reacting to them. This might seem simple, but many negative thinking cycles operate below conscious awareness. automatically triggering emotional and behavioral responses before you realize what's happening. Developing this awareness requires specific practices that strengthen your attention and metacognition, your ability to observe your own thinking processes. Mindfulness meditation serves as a cornerstone practice during the awareness stage. By spending even 5 minutes daily observing your thoughts without judgment, you strengthen neural connections and brain regions associated with self-awareness and attention control. Research using functional MRI scans shows that regular mindfulness practice increases activity in the prefrontal cortex while reducing reactivity in the amygdala. This shift creates the neural foundation for greater awareness of thought patterns as they emerge rather than after they've triggered emotional reactions. Cognitive journaling complements meditation by helping you identify specific thought patterns that appear repeatedly. This process is straightforward. When you notice strong negative emotions, write down the thoughts associated with them. Then look for recurring themes across multiple entries. Are you frequently engaging in catastrophic thinking, self-criticism, mind reading? This written record makes patterns visible that might otherwise remain hidden in the background noise of daily mental activity. The act of writing also engages different neural networks than thinking alone, creating additional pathways for awareness. The role of the awareness stage in the overall model cannot be overstated. Without accurate awareness of your current mental habits, attempts to change them will likely target the wrong patterns or use ineffective approaches. Think of this stage as creating a detailed map of your mental landscape, identifying both the problematic pathways you want to redirect and the potential routes for developing healthier alternatives. This clarity dramatically increases the effectiveness of the exercises you'll implement in the action stage that follows. Stage 2, action. The action stage builds directly upon the awareness you've developed, implementing specific exercises that create and strengthen new neural pathways. This stage applies the neuroplasticity principle that neurons that fire together wire together through consistent, deliberate practice of alternative thought patterns. The exercises in this stage are not random. They should directly target the specific negative patterns identified during the awareness stage, providing alternative neural pathways that can eventually replace problematic ones. Visualization techniques form a powerful component of the action stage. When you vividly imagine responding to situations with new thought patterns, you activate many of the same neural networks that would fire during actual experiences. Research with athletes shows that mental rehearsal activates motor neurons similar to physical practice. The same principle applies to thought patterns. Mentally rehearsing calm responses to stressful situations strengthens the neural pathways that support those responses. For maximum effectiveness, make these visualizations as detailed and sensory-rich as possible, including how you would feel, think, and act when implementing your new response patterns. Affirmations and self-talk modifications provide another avenue for creating new neural connections. The language you use when talking to yourself shapes your neural architecture over time. If your self-talk habitually includes phrases like, "I always mess up," or "nothing ever works out for me," you're strengthening neural pathways associated with helplessness and pessimism. By consciously practicing alternative statements based on evidence, "I've handled difficult situations before," or "I'm learning and improving through this process," you build competing neural pathways. The key is consistency. Brief daily practice is more effective than occasional longer sessions. Brain training games and activities that target specific cognitive skills offer a more structured approach to building new neural pathways. For example, if catastrophic thinking is a pattern identified in your awareness stage, exercises that strengthen cognitive flexibility would be particularly valuable. These might include puzzles requiring multiple solution approaches or games that involve rapidly shifting between different rules. Such activities strengthen the brain's executive function networks, making it easier to shift away from negative thought spirals when they begin. The growing field of digital brain training apps provides accessible options, though even traditional activities like crossword puzzles or learning new skills can offer similar benefits. The action stage works most effectively when exercises are performed consistently and with full attention. Neuroplasticity responds to signals that certain neural connections are important to maintain and strengthen. Brief, daily practice sends a stronger signal than occasional intensive sessions. Similarly, exercises performed with focused attention create stronger neural changes than those done while distracted. This doesn't mean you need to dedicate hours each day. Even 5 minutes of fully focused practice can drive meaningful neural changes if maintained consistently over time. Stage 3. Reflection. The reflection stage completes the neuroplasticity development model by incorporating structured evaluation and adjustment processes. Without reflection, you might continue practices that aren't effectively targeting your specific thought patterns or miss opportunities to build on successful changes. This stage transforms neuroplasticity training from a rigid protocol into an adaptive process that becomes increasingly effective over time. Regular reflection allows you to recognize subtle improvements that might otherwise go unnoticed, providing motivation to continue the practice. Keeping a progress journal creates a tangible record of your neuroplasticity training journey. Unlike the cognitive journal from the awareness stage, which focuses on identifying thought patterns, the progress journal tracks changes in your responses to triggers and the effectiveness of specific practices. Simple entries noting what worked, what didn't, and any insights gained provide valuable data for refining your approach. This written record also counteracts the brain's tendency to discount gradual improvements, allowing you to see progress that unfolds too slowly to notice day by day. The reflection stage incorporates regular review periods where you access which mental exercises are creating the most significant changes. Everyone's brain responds differently to various approaches. Some people might find visualization extremely effective, while others gain more benefit from verbal affirmations or cognitive games. By systematically tracking your responses to different practices, you can gradually customize your neuroplasticity training to match your unique neural architecture. This personalization dramatically increases effectiveness compared to generic approaches that don't account for individual differences. Setback analysis forms another critical component of the reflection stage. When you slip back into old thought patterns despite consistent practice, which inevitably happens during any change process, reflection converts these moments from discouraging failures into valuable learning opportunities. By examining the circumstances surrounding setbacks, you can identify specific triggers or situations that require additional attention. Perhaps certain physical states, hunger, fatigue, or social contexts make you feel more vulnerable to negative thought patterns. This knowledge allows you to develop targeted strategies for these high-risk situations, strengthening your overall resilience. Component relationships and system dynamics. The 3 stages of the neuroplasticity development model, awareness, action, and reflection, function as an integrated system rather than isolated components. Each stage builds upon and enhances the others, creating a positive feedback loop that accelerates change over time. Greater awareness leads to more targeted action. Effective action provides material for meaningful reflection, and thoughtful reflection enhances future awareness. This synergistic relationship between components creates a system that becomes increasingly effective with continued engagement. The NDM operates as a dynamic rather than linear process. While initially you might move sequentially through the stages, over time they begin to operate concurrently, with continuous movement between awareness, action, and reflection. This cyclical nature creates an upward spiral where each revolution through the stages builds upon previous progress. The model also incorporates adaptation mechanisms through the reflection stage, allowing the system to adjust to changing circumstances and respond to both setbacks and breakthroughs appropriately. The effectiveness of the NDM framework stems from its alignment with how neuroplasticity actually works in the brain. Awareness practices engage attentional networks, action exercises trigger Hebbian learning, neurons that fire together wire together, and reflection processes activate metacognitive systems that enable adaptation. By working with rather than against the brain's natural mechanisms for change, the model maximizes the impact of your efforts to reshape thought patterns and build resilience. Through the systematic application of the neuroplasticity development model, you transform abstract knowledge about brain plasticity into concrete changes in thinking patterns. By developing awareness of habitual thoughts, consistently practicing new neural pathways, and reflectively refining your approach, you harness your brain's natural capacity for change to overcome negative thinking and build lasting resilience. Rewiring your reality, the brain builder's blueprint. As we've seen throughout this chapter, neuroplasticity isn't just a fascinating scientific concept, it's the biological foundation for genuine mental transformation. The plastic nature of your brain means that negative thought patterns are not permanent fixtures, but rather habits that can be reshaped with consistent practice and intention. This understanding offers profound hope, no matter your age or how deeply entrenched your thought patterns may seem. Change remains possible. The science we've explored confirms that your brain continues to form new neural connections throughout your life, adapting to your experiences, focus, and mental exercises. This remarkable ability means that with dedicated practice, you can literally rewire your brain to support more positive thinking, greater resilience, and improved emotional balance. The neural renovation process. Step 1. Educate your brain, 1 to 2 weeks. Begin by deepening your understanding of neuroplasticity through audiobooks, podcasts, or documentaries. Knowledge creates the foundation for meaningful change. Spend 20 minutes daily learning about how your brain forms and strengthens neural pathways. Step 2. Build your mental gym, 3 to 5 days. Design a daily routine incorporating brain training exercises. Start with 10 to 15 minutes of puzzles, memory games, or cognitive challenges that push your comfort zone slightly. Schedule this time consistently. Neuroplasticity thrives on regularity. Step 3. Practice present moment awareness. Ongoing. Implement mindfulness techniques for 5 to 10 minutes daily to recognize negative thought patterns as they arise. Use simple breathing exercises or guided meditations to strengthen your awareness muscle. This heightened attention is crucial for catching unhelpful thoughts before they spiral. Step 4. Map your mental landscape, 1 to 2 weeks. Create a dedicated thought journal where you track recurring negative patterns and their triggers. Note the situations, times of day, or interactions that typically precede unhelpful thinking. This mapping process helps identify which neural pathways need the most attention. Step 5. Generate positive neural growth weekly. Engage in activities proven to promote neurogenesis, such as physical exercise, learning new skills, or creative pursuits. Aim for 3 30-minute sessions weekly of moderate physical activity, which research shows significantly enhances brain plasticity and mood regulation. Step 6. Challenge your neural networks 2 to 3 times monthly. Deliberately seek new learning experiences that push you beyond familiar territory. Take a class, try a new hobby, or explore an unfamiliar subject. Each novel experience creates opportunities for fresh neural connections that support mental flexibility. Step 7. Build your brain trust. Ongoing. Cultivate relationships that support your neuroplasticity practice. Share your journey with at least one trusted friend or Join a group focused on personal growth. Social connections enhance learning and provide accountability for consistent practice. Step 8. Review and recalibrate monthly. Return to your journal to assess progress and adjust your approach. Celebrate new positive thought patterns you've developed and identify areas still needing attention. This reflection process ensures your practice evolves with your changing needs. The power of neuroplasticity lies not just in its scientific validity, but in its practical application to daily life. By engaging in these deliberate practices, you're not merely thinking differently, you're physically changing the architecture of your brain. Every time you challenge a negative thought, practice mindfulness, or learn something new, you're creating neural pathways that make positive thinking increasingly natural and automatic. Remember that this process isn't about achieving perfection, but about progress. Some days will feel more successful than others, and that's completely normal. The brain responds to consistent effort over time, not overnight transformation. Trust the process and give yourself grace as you work with, not against, your brain's natural capacity for change. As you move forward to the next chapter, carry this fundamental truth with you. Your brain is remarkably adaptable, and with the right practices, you can reshape your thinking patterns in profound and lasting ways. The neural foundations you're building now will support your journey through the strategies and techniques still to come. The pause between storms. You've now journeyed through the first crucial stages of transformation, learning to recognize distorted thoughts and replacing them with balanced, constructive perspectives. If you've made it this far, take a breath and let that truth sink in. You've already begun to change the way your mind works. You've challenged thoughts that once dictated your emotions, questioned assumptions that felt unshakable, and allowed space for clarity to emerge where chaos once ruled. That is no small feat. Before we move forward into the next stage, cultivating a growth mindset, it's worth pausing to honor the quiet victories. Each time you stopped a negative spiral midstream, each moment you chose reflection over reaction, you rewired your brain ever so slightly toward peace. In those moments, you didn't just think differently, you reclaimed agency over your inner world. This is the kind of progress that often goes unnoticed because it doesn't announce itself, but it's the kind that endures. And now, I want to extend an invitation, one not for me, but for those who will walk the same path after you. Somewhere, another person sits where you once sat, searching for answers, desperate for relief from the endless loop of negative thinking. They may not yet believe that change is possible. Your voice could be the bridge that helps them begin. If this audiobook has given you even a moment of clarity or a new way to relate to your thoughts, I would be deeply grateful if you took a brief moment to leave an honest review. Your experience, what resonated, what helped, even what challenged you, could become the encouragement someone else needs to start their own journey. Reviews aren't just digital notes. They are small acts of compassion. They help people discover guidance that might ease their suffering and remind them that healing isn't reserved for others. It's available to them too. Thank you for being part of this quiet movement toward healthier thinking and emotional balance. Each insight you've gained here adds a drop of light into a world often clouded by self-doubt and fear. By sharing your reflection, you help that light reach further to another listener, another mind, another moment of breakthrough. P.S. Your review doesn't need to be long or elaborate, just honest. One paragraph from you might become the moment someone else realizes that freedom from negative thinking is possible. Chapter 3. The Resilience Cycle. Engaging with dynamic mental processes. What if you could transform negative thoughts, not just once, but repeatedly? The idea that we can permanently fix our minds is perhaps one of the most destructive myths in modern psychology. Many of us embark on personal development journeys expecting to reach some golden plateau where negative thoughts no longer affect us. Yet those who have truly mastered mental well-being understand a more nuanced truth. Resilience isn't a destination. It's a dynamic, ongoing practice. Think about the last time a negative thought grabbed hold of you. Perhaps it was self-doubt before a presentation, anxiety about a relationship, or harsh self-criticism after a mistake. In these moments, you're not experiencing a failure of character or evidence that you haven't healed properly. You're simply encountering an opportunity to engage with your resilience cycle, the continuous process of recognizing, confronting, and adjusting thought patterns that form the backbone of lasting mental strength. True resilience lives in motion, not in static achievement. Just as physical fitness requires consistent training rather than a one-time effort, mental resilience demands ongoing engagement with our thought patterns. This chapter introduces you to the dynamic nature of this process, how developing awareness of your thoughts creates space for choice, how replacing disempowering narratives builds mental muscle, and how personalizing your approach ensures sustainable progress. What makes this approach different is its emphasis on process over perfection. Many traditional methods for managing negative thoughts fall short because they promise complete elimination of difficult emotions or suggest that with enough practice, you'll never struggle again. The resilient cycle approach embraces a more realistic vision. You will encounter negative thoughts throughout your life, but you can develop increasingly sophisticated ways to work with them rather than against them. The science of dynamic resilience. Recent neuroscience research confirms what many experienced practitioners have long understood. Our brains remain remarkably adaptable throughout our lives. This neuroplasticity means we can literally reshape neural pathways through consistent practice. When you engage with the resilience cycle, you're not just changing your thoughts temporarily, you're gradually rewriting the default programming of your mind. This is why one-off interventions rarely create lasting change, while repeated engagement with resilience practices can transform your relationship with negative thinking over time. In the coming sections, we'll explore the three core elements of the resilience cycle: identification and interception of negative thought patterns through heightened self-awareness, active replacement of these thoughts through cognitive restructuring and behavioral activation, and the creation of personalized resilience routines that evolve with your needs. You'll learn practical strategies for each phase, grounded in evidence-based approaches, but accessible enough to implement immediately in your daily life. The path forward isn't about eliminating negative thoughts forever. It's about developing a more skillful relationship with your mind. When you stop treating negative thoughts as enemies to be vanquished and start viewing them as signals to engage your resilience practices, you fundamentally shift your relationship with difficulty. This perspective change alone can dramatically reduce the power negative thoughts hold over your actions, emotions, and sense of self. As we move through this chapter, I invite you to approach these concepts not as quick fixes, but as lifelong companions, reliable tools you can return to again and again as you navigate life's inevitable challenges. The resilience cycle isn't just another self-help technique. It's an entirely different way of understanding what it means to overcome negative thoughts. Let's begin. The long road to mental fortitude. James sat at the edge of the bed, watching the rain tap against the window pane. The morning light struggled through the gray clouds, casting shadows across the worn carpet of his bedroom. He had not slept well. The same thoughts that had plagued him for weeks circled his mind like vultures. 3 months since the accident, he thought. He rubbed his knee, feeling the scar tissue beneath his pajama pants. Physical therapy was working, but his mind remained fractured. Each night brought nightmares of screeching tires and shattering glass. Each morning brought the weight of what had happened, what he had lost. He reached for the book on his nightstand. Mental Resilience, The Path Forward, a gift from his sister. James had scoffed when she first gave it to him, but desperation had driven him to open it last week. Now, dog-eared pages marked passages that resonated with his broken spirit. Resilience isn't about bouncing back, one passage read. It's about moving forward with a new understanding. Outside, a cardinal landed on the rain-slicked branch of the maple tree. Its red feathers stood stark against the gray morning. James watched it, momentarily distracted from his thoughts. The bird cocked its head, as if studying him through the glass, then flew away. The movement reminded him of what Dr. Mitchell had said during yesterday's session. Notice the world around you. When the thoughts come, acknowledge them, then redirect. He tried it now. I am scared, he thought. I am angry. I miss who I was before. He acknowledged each thought as it came, not pushing them away, but not letting them consume him either. The technique felt awkward, like learning to walk again, but that's what this was, wasn't it? Learning to navigate with a new map after the old one had burned. James stood, wincing slightly at the stiffness in his knee. He made his way to the kitchen and prepared breakfast, simple motions that grounded him in the present. The eggs sizzled in the pan. The scent of toast filled the small apartment. Small victories. Dr. Mitchell called these moments, evidence that life continued. As he ate, James opened his journal. Another recommendation from the book. Document the journey. Not just the setbacks, but the progress too. He wrote about the cardinal, about sleeping 20 minutes longer before the nightmares came, about managing to call his mother yesterday without breaking down. The pen moved across the page, transforming nebulous feelings into concrete words. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister. Group meets at 7. I'll pick you up at 6:30? The support group had been her idea too. James had resisted for weeks, but last Thursday he'd finally relented. Listening to others speak their truth had cracked something open in him. Not healing, not yet, but the possibility of it. Yes, he typed back. Then after a moment, thank you. The two words felt insufficient for what he meant. Thank you for not giving up, for seeing what I could be, when all I see is what I've lost. Rain drummed against the roof as James rinsed his plate. The day stretched before him, empty hours he once would have filled with work. Now he had to structure his own time. Another lesson from the book. Create meaningful routines. He moved to the living room and unrolled his yoga mat, positioning it before the window where he could see the rain-washed world outside. The stretches hurt. His body remembered the trauma, held it in tight muscles and damaged tissue. There was something in the deliberate movement that quieted his mind. Breathe in, breathe out, extend, hold, release. His thoughts still came. They always did. But now he observed them rather than becoming them. I am not my thoughts, he repeated silently. Another mantra from the book. I am the awareness behind them. What shapes a mind capable of bending without breaking? Is it merely the practices we adopt, or something deeper within us that recognizes our capacity to transform suffering into strength? The path to recognition. Negative thought patterns are like silent intruders, creeping into our mental space without announcement. They shape our perceptions, influence our emotions, and often dictate our actions, all while operating largely beneath our conscious awareness. These patterns form through repeated neural pathways, strengthening each time we engage with a negative thought. Research from cognitive neuroscience shows that these patterns become automatic over time, requiring less and less conscious effort to activate. Imagine your mind as a forest with countless paths. The trails you walk most frequently become wider and easier to travel, while those less traveled gradually fade away. Your negative thought patterns are simply well-worn trails, not permanent highways. With mindfulness and self-awareness, you can begin to notice when you're automatically following these familiar routes, and more importantly, you can choose different paths. Mindfulness meditation serves as a powerful tool for intercepting negative thoughts before they gain momentum. This practice involves observing your thoughts without judgment, creating space between stimulus and response. A 2013 study published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology found that just 8 weeks of mindfulness practice significantly reduced negative thought patterns and symptoms of anxiety and depression. The key lies in the regular practice of simply noticing your thoughts rather than automatically believing or acting on them. The process begins with recognition. Throughout your day, pause occasionally to ask, "What am I thinking right now?" This simple question creates a moment of awareness that can interrupt automatic negative patterns. Notice the content of your thoughts, their emotional tone, and any physical sensations they trigger. These brief check-ins require only seconds, but build the foundation for lasting change. Many people find that setting random phone reminders helps establish this habit of thought awareness. Self-awareness expands beyond just noticing thoughts to include understanding your personal triggers. These triggers might be situations, people, or even times of day that consistently activate negative thought patterns. By documenting when negative thoughts occur most frequently, you can identify patterns and prepare yourself for challenging moments. This preparation doesn't mean avoiding triggers. Rather, it means approaching them with greater consciousness and choice. Language plays a crucial role in how we experience our thoughts. Notice the specific words and phrases that dominate your inner dialogue. Do you use absolute terms like always, never, or impossible? Do you engage in catastrophic thinking, immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios? Simply observing this language without trying to change it immediately is an important step. Awareness precedes change. One particularly effective mindfulness technique involves labeling thoughts as they arise. When you notice a negative thought, simply label it planning thought, worrying thought, judging thought, or remembering thought. This practice creates distance between you and the thought, weakening its automatic power. Research from UCLA found that naming emotional experiences reduces their intensity by activating the prefrontal cortex, which helps regulate emotional responses. Think of this awareness process as similar to becoming a weather observer, rather than being caught in the storm. You're learning to notice the gathering clouds of negative thinking without becoming drenched in the downpour. With practice, you'll recognize the earliest signs of approaching storms and have more choices about how to respond. The first step toward freedom from negative thought patterns is simply learning to see them clearly through the practice of mindfulness and self-awareness. Transforming mental landscapes. Cognitive restructuring represents a systematic approach to challenging and replacing disempowering thoughts. This evidence-based technique, developed within cognitive behavioral therapy, helps identify irrational or unhelpful thinking patterns and replace them with more balanced alternatives. At its core, cognitive restructuring involves questioning the validity and helpfulness of negative thoughts rather than automatically accepting them as true. The process begins with catching a negative thought in action. For example, after making a small mistake at work, you might think, "I'm completely incompetent." Once identified, examine this thought for cognitive distortions, mental filters that warp your perception of reality. Common distortions include catastrophizing, assuming the worst possible outcome, black and white thinking, seeing situations as all good or all bad, and overgeneralization, applying one negative experience to all situations. Is your thought demonstrating any evidence of these distortions? If so, challenge it by asking specific questions. What evidence supports or contradicts this thought? Is there another way to interpret this situation? How would I view this if it happened to someone else? These questions create space between you and your automatic thoughts, allowing for more flexible thinking. Picture your mind as a courtroom where negative thoughts are placed on trial. You serve simultaneously as the prosecutor, challenging these thoughts, the defense attorney considering alternative perspectives, and ultimately the judge weighing all evidence. This mental courtroom doesn't seek to dismiss all negative thinking, only to ensure that your thoughts are reasonably accurate and constructive rather than distorted and harmful. After challenging negative thoughts, the next step is crafting alternative perspectives that are both realistic and empowering. Rather than "I'm completely incompetent," a more balanced thought might be, "I made a mistake on this particular task, which is normal. I've completed many similar tasks successfully in the past." The goal isn't positive thinking at all costs. It's accurate thinking that acknowledges difficulties without magnifying them. Behavioral activation complements cognitive restructuring by focusing on actions rather than thoughts alone. This approach recognizes that we often feel better when we do better, and our behaviors can lead our emotions rather than merely following them. When caught in negative thought cycles, taking purposeful action can interrupt rumination and provide evidence that contradicts pessimistic predictions. The principles of behavioral activation are straightforward yet powerful. First, identify activities that align with your values and typically bring a sense of accomplishment, connection, or enjoyment. Next, schedule these activities deliberately, especially during periods when negative thinking is most likely to dominate. Finally, engage in these activities even when motivation is low, recognizing that action often precedes motivation rather than following it. Dr. Martin Seligman, founder of positive psychology, explains, "The key to resilience is reframing, the ability to shift from thinking this terrible event has happened and my life is ruined to this terrible event has happened and I have choices about how to respond." This reframing process combines cognitive restructuring with behavioral activation to create new patterns of thinking and acting. Consider Sarah, who struggled with thoughts of social rejection. Whenever she received a delayed response to a message, her mind immediately concluded, "They're avoiding me because I'm boring." Through cognitive restructuring, she learned to challenge this thought. There are many reasons someone might delay responding. They could be busy, distracted, or simply taking time to think. Through behavioral activation, she continued reaching out to friends despite her anxiety, gradually collecting evidence that contradicted her fears. The integration of cognitive restructuring and behavioral activation creates a powerful feedback loop. Changed thinking leads to different actions, which create new experiences, which in turn support more balanced thinking. This cycle builds momentum over time, gradually replacing disempowering thought patterns with more constructive alternatives. How might your life change if you approached each negative thought not as an absolute truth, but as one possibility among many? Creating your resilience routine. Building mental resilience isn't a one-time achievement, but an ongoing practice. Like physical fitness, mental strength requires consistent attention and development tailored to your unique needs. Research consistently shows that the most effective resilience practices are those personalized to individual experiences, preferences, and challenges, rather than generic approaches. Everyone's mental landscape differs. What triggers negative thought patterns in one person may have little effect on another. Similarly, what works to interpret these patterns varies widely between individuals. Some find meditation transformative, while others connect more deeply with journaling, physical exercise, or creative expression. Effective resilience routines acknowledge these differences and build upon personal strengths and preferences. Think of your resilience routine as similar to a personalized nutrition plan rather than a one-size-fits-all diet. A good nutritionist considers your body's unique needs, your lifestyle, and your food preferences when creating a sustainable eating plan. Similarly, your resilience routine should honor your psychological makeup, daily schedule, and preferred methods of self-reflection and growth. Developing this personalized approach begins with experimentation. Try various resilience-building practices for short periods, noting which ones resonate most strongly. Pay attention not to just what feels comfortable, but to what produces meaningful shifts in your thought patterns and emotional state. The most effective practices often combine some level of challenge with a sense of natural fit. The AACCS Resilience Framework. The AACCS Resilience Framework provides a comprehensive approach to establishing and maintaining your personalized resilience routine. Each component builds upon the others, creating a dynamic system for engaging with and transforming negative thought patterns. Awareness. Awareness forms the foundation of mental resilience. Without recognizing negative thought patterns as they emerge, we remain at their mercy. Mindfulness practices, such as meditation, breath awareness, or simple thought observation, develop this crucial skill of noticing without immediate reaction. Start by dedicating short periods, even 2 to 3 minutes, several times daily, to check in with your current thoughts and emotions. Notice any physical sensations accompanying these mental states, as the body often signals negative thinking patterns before conscious awareness arises. Regular body scans can reveal tension in the shoulders, chest tightening, or shallow breathing that accompanies stress-inducing thoughts. The awareness component also involves tracking patterns over time. Consider keeping a thought journal where you briefly note recurring negative thoughts, when they occur, and what triggers them. This documentation builds self-knowledge that informs the other components of the framework. As psychologist Carl Jung observed, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Analysis. Once aware of negative thought patterns, the analysis component engages your critical thinking skills to examine these patterns objectively. This is where cognitive restructuring techniques become essential, helping you assess whether thoughts are accurate, helpful, and proportionate to the situation. Analysis involves asking targeted questions about your thoughts. What evidence supports or contradicts this thought? Am I confusing feelings with facts? Am I making assumptions without adequate information? How would I view the situation if it happened to someone else? These questions create distance between you and your thoughts, enabling a more balanced perspective. This component also includes identifying recurring themes in your negative thinking. Do your thoughts frequently center on rejection, failure, lack of control, or perfectionism? Recognizing these themes helps target specific cognitive distortions that may require focused attention. Remember that analysis aims not to eliminate negative thinking entirely, but to ensure thoughts are reasonably accurate and constructive. Adaptation. The adaptation component moves from awareness and analysis into action. Here, behavioral activation techniques help you respond to negative thought patterns with constructive behaviors rather than avoidance or rumination. This component recognizes that changing actions often leads to changing thoughts, creating positive feedback loops. Adaptation involves deliberately choosing behaviors that contradict negative thought patterns. If thoughts say, "I can't handle this challenge," adaptation might mean breaking the challenge into smaller steps and tackling the first one. If thoughts predict social rejection, adaptation could involve reaching out to connect despite the discomfort. This component also includes developing specific response plans for common negative thought triggers. Having predetermined strategies reduces the cognitive load during difficult moments when decision-making capacity may be compromised. These response plans might include reaching out to a supportive person, engaging in physical activity, practicing a specific breathing technique, or temporarily shifting focus to a different task. Consistency. The consistency component addresses the reality that resilience develops through regular practice rather than sporadic effort. This component focuses on establishing sustainable routines that gradually strengthen mental resilience over time. Start by identifying the minimal effective dose of resilience practices. What's the smallest regular commitment that produces meaningful results? For many people, consistency of practice matters more than duration. 5 minutes of daily meditation often proves more beneficial than an hour-long session once a week. This component also involves integrating resilience practices into existing routines rather than viewing them as separate activities. Attach thought awareness to daily activities, like showering or commuting. Link cognitive restructuring to regular transitions in your day. Connect behavioral activation to existing habits. These connections make resilience practices more sustainable by reducing the activation energy required. Support. The support component recognizes that resilience develops most effectively within a context of connection rather than isolation. This involves both receiving support from others and offering it, creating reciprocal relationships that strengthen collective resilience. Identify specific people who can provide different types of support: those who listen without immediately trying to fix problems, those who offer perspective when negative thinking distorts reality, and those who provide accountability for your resilience practices. Consider formal support options as well, such as therapy, coaching, or support groups focused on mental well-being. This component also involves communicating your resilience goals to appropriate supporters. Let them know specific ways they can help, whether through check-ins, gentle challenges to distorted thinking, or simply being present during difficult times. Remember that seeking support demonstrates strength rather than weakness, as it reflects self-awareness and commitment to growth. The AACCS framework functions as an integrated system rather than isolated components. Awareness enables effective analysis, which informs productive adaptation, which becomes sustainable through consistency and is enhanced through support. Together, these components create a dynamic approach to building mental resilience tailored to your unique needs and experiences. By engaging with all the components of the AACCS resilience framework, developing awareness of thought patterns, analyzing them critically, adapting behaviors thoughtfully, maintaining consistency in practice, and leveraging supportive relationships, you create a personalized, dynamic routine that transforms how you recognize, confront, and adjust negative thinking, ultimately building lasting mental resilience. The Resilience Roadmap, your 30-day path to stronger thinking. Transforming your thought patterns isn't a one-time event, but a continuous journey. The approaches we've explored throughout this chapter, mindfulness, cognitive restructuring, and personalized resilience routines, work together as an integrated system that becomes more powerful with consistent practice. What makes this approach truly effective is its dynamic nature. Your mind isn't static, and neither should your strategies be. The practices we've discussed aren't meant to be rigid formulas, but adaptable tools you can customize to your unique thought patterns, challenges, and strengths. Remember that intercepting negative thought patterns through heightened self-awareness creates the necessary foundation. Without recognizing what's happening in your mind, change remains impossible. Building upon this awareness, actively replacing disempowering thoughts through cognitive restructuring and behavioral activation gives you concrete alternatives rather than just awareness of problems. Finally, establishing your personalized resilience practice ensures these skills become integrated into your daily life, making resilience a natural response rather than a forced effort. The Recalibrate Method, your 30-day mental resilience builder. Goal: transform reactive thought patterns into responsive, empowering mental habits within 30 days through daily practice. 1. Recognize your thought patterns, days 1 through 3. Set aside 10 minutes each morning for mindful observation of your thoughts. Note recurring themes without judgment. Create a thought log in a dedicated notebook, capturing negative thoughts as they arise throughout your day. 2. Examine the evidence, days 4 through 7. Review each negative thought from your log and ask, what factual evidence supports this, and what evidence contradicts it? Write both columns side by side, noting where assumptions differ from facts. 3. Challenge each unhelpful thought, days 8 through 12. For each negative pattern identified, write 3 alternative perspectives that are equally or more valid. Start with, what else could this mean, or how might someone I admire view this situation? 4. Activate positive behaviors, days 13 through 17. Schedule one small action daily that contradicts your negative thought patterns. If you think, I never finish anything, complete one small task fully. Track your mood before and after these activities. 5. Link thoughts to triggers, days 18 through 21. Note the circumstances, physical sensations, or events that typically precede your negative thought spirals. Create a trigger map showing connections between specific situations and thought patterns. 6. Implement prevention strategies, days 22 through 25. Develop 2 to 3 mental circuit breakers for each identified trigger, specific actions you'll take when you notice a trigger. Example, a 2-minute breathing exercise, a brief walk, or a cognitive reframing technique. 7. Build resilience routines, days 26 through 28. Combine your most effective strategies into a daily 15-minute practice. This might include a 5-minute morning meditation, midday journaling, and an evening gratitude practice. 8. Review and adjust, days 29 through 30. Evaluate which strategies had the most impact on your thought patterns and emotional state. Refine your approach by strengthening what works and modifying what doesn't. The beauty of this response lies in its flexibility. You might find certain steps deserve more of your time, while others come naturally. Trust your experience. This is about developing what works for you, not following a rigid prescription. Moving forward with these practices doesn't mean you'll never experience negative thoughts again. Rather, you'll develop the capacity to engage with them differently, with awareness, perspective, and choice. This is the essence of the resilience cycle. Not the absence of difficulty, but the ability to move through it with greater ease and wisdom. As you continue practicing these skills, you'll notice something remarkable. Your relationship with your thoughts gradually transforms. What once felt like absolute truth becomes simply one perspective among many. What once controlled your emotions becomes merely information to consider. This shift represents the core of resilience, not the elimination of challenges, but a fundamentally different way of experiencing them. The tools and practices in this chapter aren't just techniques. They're invitations to relate to yourself with greater kindness, flexibility, and wisdom. By engaging with your thoughts as a process rather than a fixed reality, you open yourself to new possibilities in how you experience yourself and your world. Chapter 4. Debunking Mental Health Myths, Fostering Genuine Resilience. Beyond Positive Vibes, the truth about building genuine mental resilience. The persistent advice to just think positively has become as common as it is misleading. Perhaps you've tried to force optimistic thoughts when feeling anxious about a job interview, or attempted to smile through grief, only to feel worse afterward. This widespread oversimplification represents just one of many mental health myths that can actually impede genuine healing. As we near the conclusion of our journey together, this chapter addresses a critical truth. Authentic emotional resilience isn't built through bypassing negative emotions, but through understanding and working through them constructively. Throughout the previous chapters, we've explored the neuroscience behind negative thought patterns, learned techniques to interrupt overthinking spirals, and practiced evidence-based methods for cognitive restructuring. Now we confront perhaps the most pervasive obstacle to lasting change: misconceptions that keep us trapped in cycles of emotional avoidance and superficial coping. The notion that positive thinking alone can counteract years of ingrained mental habits isn't just incorrect, it's potentially harmful, creating additional layers of shame when we inevitably fail to maintain forced optimism. True transformation requires honesty, not denial. When we dismiss or attempt to leapfrog over difficult emotions, we miss critical opportunities to understand ourselves and develop authentic coping mechanisms. The brain doesn't respond well to being tricked or coerced. It responds to consistent, informed rewiring through practices that acknowledge both our struggles and our capacity for growth. This chapter examines why quick fix approaches often backfire and replaces them with evidence-based alternatives that honor the complexity of human cognition. Our approach here builds directly upon what you've already learned: the cognitive reframing techniques from Chapter 2, the mindfulness practices from Chapter 3, and the boundary-setting strategies we explored earlier all contribute to a more nuanced understanding of mental well-being. Rather than presenting emotional resilience as a destination, we now recognize it as an ongoing practice, one that accommodates setbacks and celebrates incremental progress rather than demanding perfection. In the coming sections, we'll first identify and dismantle common mental health misconceptions that might be hampering your progress. You'll learn to recognize when seemingly helpful advice actually reinforces unhelpful patterns, and you'll develop criteria for evaluating mental health information critically. We'll then explore approaches to constructively process negative emotions rather than suppressing them, building on the foundation of self-awareness we've established throughout this audiobook. Finally, we'll integrate these insights into a balanced framework for emotional resilience that's both practical and sustainable. The science is clear. Cognitive change is complex and requires discipline. It demands more than affirmations or wishful thinking. It requires a fundamental shift in how we relate to our thoughts and emotions. By the end of this chapter, you'll understand why the path through negative emotions, rather than around them, ultimately leads to greater mental clarity and emotional balance. You'll have practical tools to navigate this territory with self-compassion and increasing confidence, completing the toolkit you've been assembling throughout our journey together. Let's begin by examining the myths that may be holding you back from achieving lasting transformation. The mirage of positive thinking. The sun burned white in the mid-afternoon sky as Sarah stood at the kitchen counter, chopping vegetables with mechanical precision. She sliced through a carrot, the knife hitting the cutting board with a sharp crack. Her therapist's words from that morning echoed in her head. "It's not just about telling yourself to be happy, Sarah," Dr. Mercer had said. "That's what many people get wrong about therapy. They think it's just positive affirmations in the mirror." Sarah pushed the carrot slices aside and grabbed a bell pepper. Outside, the neighbor's sprinkler system clicked on, water arcing over the fence and catching the sunlight. She paused, if suspended in midair, watching the rainbow that formed and dissolved in seconds. Beautiful things could exist alongside pain. That was what she struggled to accept. For 3 years since David's death, well-meaning friends had told her to think positive and focus on the good memories, as if 17 years of marriage could be reduced to a highlights reel that would somehow erase the grief. Sarah resumed chopping, her movements more forceful now. "Acknowledge the pain," Dr. Mercer had advised. "Sit with it. Don't try to paint over it with false optimism." The sound of the mail slot clanking open pulled Sarah from her thoughts. Bills, probably. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and walked to the entryway, the hardwood cool beneath her bare feet. She bent to retrieve the stack of envelopes, noticing the top one bore David's old insurance company logo. Her chest tightened. 3 years, and they still sent mail addressed to him. 3 years, and the sight of his name still punched holes in her carefully constructed calm. Back in the kitchen, Sarah leaned against the counter, letter unopened in her hand. She remembered her sister Jen's advice last week over dinner. "Just think happy thoughts when you get sad," Jen had said, reaching across the table to pat Sarah's hand. "That's what I do." Sarah had nodded and changed the subject, but inside she'd felt a flare of frustration, as if her grief were a simple equation that positive thinking could solve. The therapist had explained that morning how the brain forms neural pathways through repetition, how negative thought patterns become trenches worn deep through years of use. Positive thinking has value, Dr. Mercer had said, but it's not a magical eraser. It's one tool among many, and sometimes we need to understand the negative before we can authentically embrace the positive. Sarah set the letter on the counter, and returned to her vegetables. The peppers released their sharp scent as she sliced them. She thought about resilience not as a shield against pain, but as the ability to move forward while carrying it. The kitchen filled with afternoon light, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. Sarah breathed in the moment, neither forcing cheerfulness nor surrendering to despair, just being present with all of it. She scraped the vegetables into a bowl, the colors bright against the white ceramic. Tonight she would eat dinner on the porch, watching the sunset, and feel whatever came, the grief, the gratitude, the ongoing struggle to build a life in David's absence. Dr. Mercer was right. There were no shortcuts through this landscape, but perhaps there was something valuable in the journey itself, something that positivity could never provide. What does it truly mean to build emotional resilience in a world that often suggests happiness is merely a choice away? The positive thinking trap. The oversimplification of positive thinking represents one of the most pervasive misconceptions in modern mental health discourse. Browse any bookstore's self-help section, scroll through social media, or listen to popular podcasts, and you'll encounter countless voices proclaiming that simply thinking positive can transform your life. While optimism certainly has its place, research indicates that positive thinking alone fails to address the complex neurological patterns established by years of negative thinking. According to neuroscientist Dr. Alex Korb, author of The Upward Spiral, negative thought patterns create physical neural pathways that require more than mere positive affirmations to rewire. Think of your mind as a well-traveled forest. For years, you've walked the same path, wearing it smooth and familiar. This represents your habitual thought pattern. Simply deciding to take a different route simply doesn't immediately clear a new path. The old one remains more accessible, more comfortable, drawing you back without conscious effort. Positive thinking asks you to imagine a new path without providing the tools to clear it or make it navigable. True change requires both awareness of the existing path and consistent, deliberate effort to forge and maintain the new one. The science of neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections, confirms that meaningful cognitive change demands more than surface-level positivity. A comprehensive review, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, found that forced positive thinking can actually increase anxiety and feelings of inadequacy in some individuals. When we demand positivity from ourselves, without acknowledging underlying negative emotions, we create a second layer of distress. Not only are we experiencing the original negative feeling, but now we're also feeling bad about feeling bad. Research from the University of California, Berkeley, suggests that emotional resilience stems not from avoiding negative emotions, but from developing a balanced relationship with our full emotional spectrum. Their studies show that individuals who accept and process negative emotions rather than suppressing them demonstrate greater psychological health over time. This contradicts the positive thinking only approach, which often advocates pushing away or denying negative thoughts rather than understanding them. The dangers of toxic positivity, the excessive and ineffective overgeneralization of a happy, optimistic state across all situations, have become increasingly recognized in psychological literature. When we insist on positivity, regardless of circumstances, we invalidate legitimate human experiences and emotions. A 2018 study published in Emotion found that accepting negative emotions rather than judging or dismissing them leads to better psychological health in the long term. Paradoxically, allowing ourselves to fully experience negative emotions often helps them dissipate more quickly than attempts to suppress them. The rush toward positive thinking frequently stems from discomfort with emotional pain. However, this discomfort serves important functions in our psychological development. Negative emotions signal areas requiring attention, boundaries that need protection, or values being compromised. When we automatically reframe every negative thought with a positive one, we miss crucial information about our needs and experiences. The marketing of positive thinking as a quick fix reflects our culture's broader impatience with psychological processes. Meaningful mental change, like physical fitness, develops gradually through consistent practice and effort. There are no shortcuts. Dr. Susan David, author of Emotional Agility, emphasizes that psychological health requires facing our thoughts and emotions with curiosity, compassion, and courage, rather than forced positivity or avoidance. Simplistic positive thinking often creates a phenomenon psychologists call the happiness trap. The more desperately we pursue happiness through positive thinking, the more elusive it becomes. This occurs because constant monitoring of our emotional state, am I positive enough yet, creates a self-referential loop that actually increases dissatisfaction. Authentic well-being emerges not from manufactured positivity, but from meaningful engagement with life, including its challenges. True emotional resilience requires acknowledging the complex reality of our thought patterns rather than applying simplistic positive thinking as an emotional band-aid. Working through the shadows, negative emotions serve essential functions in our psychological landscape. Far from being mistakes or failures, emotions like sadness, anger, and fear provide vital information about our experiences and needs. Research from evolutionary psychology suggests these emotions evolved as adaptive responses that helped our ancestors navigate threats and social complexities. Sadness signals loss and the need for support. Anger alerts us to boundary violations. Fear warns of potential danger. When we rush to replace these emotions with positive thinking, we silence important messengers. The consequences of emotional avoidance can be profound and far-reaching. Studies show that suppressing negative emotions actually amplifies their intensity over time, while simultaneously reducing our awareness of what triggered them. This creates a paradox where the more we avoid feelings, the stronger they become and the less we understand them. Dr. Jonathan Adler's research at Franklin W. Olin College of Engineering demonstrates that people who acknowledge and explore difficult emotions report greater psychological well-being over time than those who focus exclusively on positive experiences. Imagine trying to navigate a ship using only half your instruments. You might sail smoothly when conditions are perfect, but what happens during a storm? Without access to warning systems, depth finders, or radar, you'd be dangerously vulnerable. Similarly, when we disable our negative emotions through forced positivity, we lose critical navigational tools for life's inevitable challenges. True emotional resilience requires a complete instrument panel, all our emotions, not just the pleasant ones. Working through negative emotions constructively begins with validation. Before attempting to shift or process a difficult feeling, we must first acknowledge its presence and legitimacy. This simple act often reduces the emotion's intensity and creates space for exploration. Try saying, "This feeling makes sense given what I'm experiencing. It's okay that I feel this way right now." Notice how different this approach feels from immediately countering negative thoughts with positive ones. The practice of mindful awareness offers powerful tools for processing difficult emotions without becoming overwhelmed by them. Research from mindfulness-based cognitive therapy shows that observing emotions with curiosity rather than judgment changes our relationship to them. Begin by noticing where and how the emotion manifests in your body. Is there tightness in your chest? Heaviness in your shoulders? Simply observing these sensations often creates subtle shifts in how we experience the emotion. Emotional processing benefits significantly from language precision. Psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett's research demonstrates that expanding our emotional vocabulary, being able to distinguish between similar but distinct feelings like disappointment, dejection, and despair, increases our regulatory capacity. This specificity helps transform vague emotional distress into clearer experiences we can address more effectively. Practice naming your emotions with increasing precision, moving beyond basic labels like bad or upset toward more nuanced descriptions. The cure for the pain is in the pain, wrote the 13th century poet Rumi, capturing an essential truth about emotional healing. Counterintuitive as it might seem, moving through difficult feelings rather than around them often provides the most direct path to relief. A landmark study published in the Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psychology found that exposure to avoided emotions, gradually facing what we fear, significantly reduced distress over time. This principle underlies many effective therapeutic approaches. Writing offers a particularly effective method for processing negative emotions. Research by James Penbaker at the University of Texas found that expressive writing about difficult experiences for just 15 to 20 minutes several times a week led to remarkable improvements in both psychological and physical health. The act of translating emotional experience into language appears to help organize and integrate difficult feelings, reducing their disruptive power. Try writing without censorship about challenging emotions, focusing on both the feelings themselves and any insights they might offer. The goal of emotional processing isn't to eliminate negative feelings, but to develop a healthier relationship with them. This includes recognizing when emotions provide useful information versus when they've become habitual or disproportionate responses. Sometimes, sadness appropriately reflects a significant loss. Other times, it may be an automatic reaction based on past experiences rather than current reality. Learning to distinguish between these scenarios represents a crucial aspect of emotional maturity. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, wrote psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. Working through negative emotions effectively doesn't mean they control our actions. We can acknowledge anger while choosing not to act destructively. We can feel fear without being paralyzed by it. This distinction between feeling and action constitutes a fundamental aspect of emotional intelligence that positive thinking only approaches often neglect. What might become possible in your life if, instead of fighting against negative emotions, you learn to listen to what they're trying to tell you? Building authentic emotional resilience. Emotional resilience, the ability to adapt to stressful situations and recover from difficulties, develops through balanced engagement with our full range of experiences. Research from positive psychology pioneer Dr. Barbara Fredrickson indicates that emotional health stems not from the absence of negative emotions, but from a favorable ratio of positive to negative experiences, approximately 3-to-1. This balanced approach recognizes that both positive and challenging experiences contribute to psychological strength. The foundation of genuine resilience begins with self-awareness. Without accurate recognition of our emotional states, attempts at regulation remain haphazard and often ineffective. Regular check-ins with yourself, simple moments of pausing to ask, "What am I feeling right now?" build the emotional intelligence necessary for resilience. Studies show that this awareness alone can decrease emotional reactivity and increase response flexibility, even before applying specific coping strategies. Resilience requires developing a comprehensive emotional toolkit rather than relying on a single approach like positive thinking. Different situations call for different strategies. Sometimes, cognitive reframing helps shift perspective productivity. Other times, acceptance of difficult emotions without attempting to change them proves most effective. Still, other situations benefit from problem solving, distraction, or seeking social support. Research consistently shows that individuals with diverse emotional regulation strategies demonstrate greater psychological flexibility than those with limited options. Consider your emotional resilience like a garden that needs varied attention to flourish. A garden requires sunshine, Certainly comparable, positive experience and thoughts, but also needs rain, fertilizer, pruning, and protection from pests. Focusing solely on sunshine while ignoring these other elements would create an imbalanced environment where plants struggle to thrive. Similarly, our emotional well-being requires diverse inputs and maintenance approaches working in harmony. The practice of self-compassion plays a crucial role in building sustainable resilience. Dr. Kristen Neff's research demonstrates that self-compassion, treating ourselves with the same kindness we would offer a good friend, correlates strongly with emotional well-being and resilience. Unlike positive thinking, which often involves judging certain thoughts as bad and replacing them with good ones, self-compassion accepts our full human experience with kindness. This includes acknowledging imperfection and struggle as normal, rather than as failures requiring correction. Building emotional resilience involves expanding our window of tolerance, the zone in which we can function effectively despite emotional activation. Neurobiological research shows that this window can be widened through practices that strengthen the connection between thinking and feeling brain regions. Regular meditation, for example, increases gray matter density in areas associated with emotional regulation, while also enhancing connectivity between the prefrontal cortex, rational thinking, and limbic system, emotional processing regions. Even 5 minutes of daily practice begins building these neural pathways. Meaningful connections with others provide essential support for emotional resilience. Harvard's 80-year study of adult development found social connections to be the strongest predictor of both happiness and physical health throughout life. Importantly, resilience doesn't mean handling everything independently. It means knowing when and how to draw on supportive resources, including relationships. Cultivating a network of authentic connections where vulnerability is welcomed creates a protective foundation for navigating life's challenges. Physical well-being significantly impacts emotional resilience, creating bidirectional effects often overlooked in mental health discussions. Inadequate sleep impairs emotional regulation and problem solving, while amplifying negative emotional responses. Regular physical movement, even gentle walking, reduces stress hormones and increases BDNF, a protein that supports neural growth and connectivity. Nutrition affects neurotransmitter function, directly influencing mood stability. Addressing these physical foundations often produces more substantial emotional benefits than cognitive approaches alone. Building genuine emotional resilience requires a comprehensive approach that honors our full human experience. By developing awareness of our emotions, practicing self-compassion, cultivating supportive relationships, and attending to our physical needs while neither avoiding negative feelings nor forcing positive ones, we create sustainable strength and flexibility. This balanced approach acknowledges both the complexity of our inner landscape and our capacity to navigate it with increasing skill and confidence. Practical framework: the aware method for processing difficult emotions. When negative emotions arise, try this step-by-step framework for processing them constructively rather than suppressing or forcing positive alternatives. A. Acknowledge. Simply notice the emotion without judgment. Name it specifically if possible. I'm feeling disappointed right now, or I notice anxiety arising. W. Welcome. Allow the emotion to be present without resistance. Remember that all emotions contain information and serve functions, even uncomfortable ones. A. Analyze. Get curious about the emotion. What triggered it? Is it connected to past experiences? What might it be telling you about your needs or values? R. Respond. Choose how to relate to the emotion. Does it require action, acceptance, or both? What would support your well-being in the situation? E. Engage. Move forward with awareness, bringing the insight gained from the emotion into your next steps, whether that means making changes or simply continuing with more self-understanding. This framework transforms difficult emotions from enemies to be fought into messengers to be consulted, building emotional intelligence and resilience in the process. The myth of mental toughness. Mental toughness has been dramatically misrepresented in popular culture, often portrayed as stoic determination that pushes through pain while ignoring emotions. True psychological resilience actually requires emotional awareness and flexibility, rather than rigidity. Research from sports psychology, where the concept originated, shows that elite athletes demonstrate not an absence of fear or doubt, but rather sophisticated emotional regulation skills that allow them to perform despite these feelings. This nuanced understanding contradicts simplistic grit your teeth and push through approaches. The concept of psychological safety, feeling secure enough to be vulnerable, take risks, and acknowledge struggles, provides an essential foundation for genuine resilience. Studies across organizational, educational, and clinical settings demonstrate that environments promoting psychological safety produce stronger performance outcomes than those emphasizing toughness alone. This research suggests that acknowledging vulnerability paradoxically builds greater strength than denying it, a direct challenge to oversimplified mental toughness narratives. Consider how we build physical strength. Effective strength training involves not just pushing to failure, but also proper rest, nutrition, and recovery periods. Similarly, mental resilience develops through engagement with challenges, followed by reflection and integration, not through relentless pushing without acknowledging limits. The most sustainable growth occurs when we balance stretching our capabilities with honoring our current capacity, a rhythm of challenge and recovery rather than constant strain. Progress in building emotional resilience rarely follows a linear trajectory. Most people experience periods of advancement, followed by setbacks or plateaus, a natural pattern in complex development. Understanding this variability helps prevent discouragement during inevitable difficulties. Each setback provides valuable information about areas needing attention rather than representing failure. This perspective shift from perfection or failure to continuous learning supports sustainable growth in emotional management skills. Remember, developing emotional resilience isn't about eliminating negative thoughts or forcing positive ones. It's about building a balanced relationship with your full range of experiences. By recognizing common misconceptions, learning to process difficult emotions constructively, and developing diverse coping strategies, you create genuine strength that serves you through life's inevitable challenges and opportunities. The myth-busting resilience blueprint. Throughout our exploration of mental health misconceptions, we've uncovered how simplified approaches like just think positive can actually undermine our emotional growth. True resilience isn't built on avoiding negative emotions, but on developing a comprehensive understanding of our mental landscape. By recognizing the complexity of our thoughts and feelings, we create space for authentic emotional processing and genuine strength. When we acknowledge that negative emotions serve important purposes, signaling our needs, highlighting our values, and providing opportunities for growth, we stop fighting against ourselves. Working through difficult feelings rather than suppressing them becomes the foundation for lasting emotional balance. This balanced approach recognizes both our vulnerability and our capacity for strength. The debunk method, dismantling myths and building authentic resilience. The journey from mental health misconceptions to genuine resilience isn't accomplished overnight. The following process guides you through transforming your understanding into practical everyday resilience. 1. Detect the myths, 1 to 2 days. Create a personal inventory of mental health beliefs you've accepted without question. For each one, note where it came from and how it might limit your emotional growth. Ask yourself, does believing this help or hinder my well-being? 2. Examine the evidence, 3 to 5 days. Research credible sources that either support or contradict these beliefs. Look for peer-reviewed studies, expert opinions from respected mental health professionals, and evidence-based approaches. The goal isn't to dismiss all conventional wisdom, but to develop a more nuanced understanding. 3. Bridge personal experience, 1 week. Reflect on times when following these beliefs either helped or hurt your emotional well-being. Journal about instances when processing difficult emotions led to growth, or when forced positivity backfired. Connect your experiences with the research you've gathered. 4. Understand the complexity, ongoing. Recognize that mental health isn't black and white. Create a both and mindset that acknowledges seemingly contradictory truths, like how both positive thinking and emotional processing have their place in well-being. 5. Navigate with flexibility, 2 to 3 weeks. Develop personalized responses to common situations based on your new understanding. Practice applying different approaches depending on the context rather than following rigid rules. Sometimes self-compassion means rest. Other times, it means challenging yourself. 6. Keep the conversation going, monthly. Share your insights with trusted friends or join communities where nuanced mental health discussions are welcomed. Both teaching and learning from others deepens your understanding and strengthens your resilience. The debunk method isn't about rejecting all conventional wisdom, but about developing discernment. As you practice this process, you'll find yourself naturally detecting oversimplifications and developing more balanced approaches to your mental well-being. As we conclude this journey, remember that true mental resilience isn't found in quick fixes or oversimplified mantras. Throughout this audiobook, we've moved from identifying negative thought patterns to understanding their neurological basis, developing practical strategies for interrupting them, and now to building authentic resilience based on a nuanced understanding of our mental health. The path to overcoming negative thinking isn't about eliminating all negative thoughts. It's about developing a relationship with your full mental experience that allows you to respond with wisdom rather than react from habit. When you encounter setbacks, this new foundation will support you, not because you've learned to always be positive, but because you've developed the capacity to work with whatever arises. True emotional resilience comes from integration, not elimination. By bringing together the science-backed strategies for disrupting overthinking spirals, the practical tools for building mental toughness, and a balanced approach to emotional well-being, you now possess a comprehensive toolkit for navigating life's challenges. Your journey doesn't end here. Each day brings new opportunities to practice these skills, deepen your understanding, and strengthen your resilience. The work may be challenging at times, but remember, you're not working against your mind, but with it. And in that partnership lies the power to transform your thoughts, your emotions, and ultimately your life. Conclusion. As we reach the end of our journey together, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the courage it takes to confront negative thinking patterns. The path we've traveled hasn't been easy. Challenging entrenched thought patterns rarely is, but I hope you've discovered that you possess the innate capacity to reshape your mental landscape. Throughout this audiobook, we've explored how our brains become wired for negativity and, more importantly, how they can be rewired through consistent, intentional practice. The science is clear. Neuroplasticity gives us the remarkable ability to create new pathways, even after years or decades of habitual negative thinking. Remember when we discussed how automatic negative thoughts can hijack your day in mere seconds? You now possess the tools to interrupt that process. The cognitive reframing techniques, mindfulness practices, and emotional regulation strategies we've covered aren't just theoretical concepts. They're practical instruments for daily mental maintenance. Perhaps the most powerful insight from our exploration is understanding that thoughts are not facts. That simple realization creates the space needed for change. By questioning your assumptions, challenging catastrophic thinking, and replacing distorted perspectives with balanced alternatives, you've learned to become an active partner in your thought processes rather than a passive victim. The scientific foundation of these approaches matters. When you practice thought-stopping techniques or engage in cognitive restructuring, you're not merely thinking positively, you're actively reshaping neural connections. The evidence-based strategies we've discussed have been tested and refined through decades of clinical research and therapeutic application. I recognize that implementation won't always be smooth. There will be days when negative spirals feel overwhelming, when your mind seems determined to undermine your efforts. During these challenging periods, remember to approach yourself with the same compassion you would offer a dear friend. Progress isn't linear. It's a practice that deepens with time and patience. Some listeners might find certain techniques more effective than others. That's perfectly normal and expected. The toolkit we've assembled is intentionally diverse because different situations and temperaments call for different approaches. I encourage you to experiment, adapt, and personalize these strategies to your unique circumstances. Let's also acknowledge that this audiobook, while comprehensive, cannot address every nuance of human cognition or every type of negative thinking pattern. Some listeners may benefit from additional support through therapy, particularly those dealing with clinical depression, severe anxiety, or trauma-related thought patterns. There's wisdom and strength in recognizing when professional guidance would be beneficial. Looking ahead, I invite you to consider this conclusion not as an ending, but as a beginning. The real work starts now, as you incorporate these practices into your daily life. Start small, perhaps with a 5-minute mindfulness practice each morning, or by challenging one negative thought per day. Build momentum gradually, celebrating small victories along the way. Your journey toward mental resilience is uniquely yours. There will be setbacks and challenges, but each time you redirect a negative thought spiral or choose a balanced perspective over catastrophizing, you strengthen your mental muscles. Each small victory rewires your brain a little more toward resilience and equilibrium. The techniques in this audiobook aren't quick fixes. They're life skills that mature and deepen with practice. The goal isn't to eliminate negative thoughts entirely. That would be neither realistic nor desirable, but to develop a healthier relationship with your thinking patterns. Success means having greater choice in how you respond to negative thoughts when they arise. As you move forward, remember that transforming thought patterns isn't about achieving perfection. It's about progress. It's about creating space between stimulus and response, between automatic negativity and conscious choice. In that space lies your freedom to choose differently, to redirect your attention and craft a more balanced mental narrative. I hope the insights and strategies we've explored together serve as reliable companions on your ongoing journey. You have everything you need to continue this work: the understanding, the tools, and most importantly, the inherent capacity for change that resides within you. Let me leave you with this thought. Your mind is a powerful instrument, capable of both creating suffering and generating profound well-being. The choice of how to use this instrument increasingly belongs to you. Trust in your ability to grow, to learn, and to reshape your thought patterns in service of a richer, more fulfilling life. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Viktor Frankl.
We appreciate you tuning in to one of our captivating audiobooks. For more immersive experiences, here is another audiobook we're certain you'll enjoy. Don't forget to show your support by liking this video, sharing what you loved about this audiobook in the comments section below, and subscribing for more captivating audiobooks like this. Thanks for being a part of our audiobook community.